Picture this. You're walking through your living room when you suddenly bump into your coffee table. But instead of just stubbing your toe, the table shoots across the room, smashes through the drywall, and lands in your neighbor's driveway. Why? Because a single ordinary house ant was resting on the leg, got startled, and kicked it. Insects are already legendary in the animal kingdom for their absurd, pound-for-pound physical abilities. A leaf-cutter ant can carry 50 times its own body weight in its jaws. A dung beetle can pull over 1,000 times its own weight, the equivalent of an average human towing 6 fully loaded double-decker buses at once. A flea can jump over 100 times its own height, which would be like a person leaping over a 60-story skyscraper in a single bound. We usually brush these mind-blowing stats off because, well, insects are tiny. Their strength is scaled down to a microscopic world where it barely impacts us. But what if that changed overnight? What if physics broke down and every insect on Earth retained its current size but gained true, absolute comic book-level super strength? What if an ant didn't just carry a leaf? What if it had the raw physical power to lift a pickup truck? Would humanity learn to harness this incredible new power source? Or would 10 quintillion super-powered bugs crush human civilization into dust before lunch? Let's find out what happens when the smallest creatures on Earth become the most dangerous force in the universe. To understand the absolute nightmare this scenario creates, we first have to understand the math. Right now, an ant's strength comes down to simple geometry, specifically the square-cube law. As an animal gets smaller, its volume and weight drop much faster than the cross-sectional area of its muscles. Because ants are tiny, their muscles don't have to carry much internal weight, leaving almost all their energy free to lift outside objects. In our scenario, we are throwing that square-cube limitation completely out the window and giving insects true, unscaled super strength. If a dung beetle can pull 1,100 times its weight relative to its size, let's scale that physical force up to match a human frame. That means an individual beetle resting on your kitchen counter now possesses the structural torque of a diesel locomotive. An ant walking along your sidewalk has the jaw pressure of an industrial hydraulic press. And remember, insects don't just outnumber us. They overwhelmingly dominate the planet's biomass. There are an estimated 10 quintillion insects alive right now. That's roughly 1.2 billion bugs for every single human being on Earth. Day one wouldn't start with a subtle shift in nature. It would start with the complete, instantaneous destruction of human infrastructure. Imagine the foundation of your house. Beneath the floorboards and under the concrete slabs, thousands of ants, termites, and beetles are constantly moving through subterranean tunnels. Normally, when a subterranean termite chews through wood, it chips away at tiny splinters over months. But with super strength, a single colony of termites wouldn't just nibble on your home's wooden frame, they would snap load-bearing timber beams like dry toothpicks. Within 48 hours, residential neighborhoods across the globe would begin collapsing in on themselves. Skyscrapers in major cities would start tilting precariously as superpowered ants in the soil beneath them easily displace tons of earth and steel reinforcement with a single push. Roads and highways would buckle overnight. Earthworms and burrowing beetles, casually flexing their new muscle power beneath the asphalt, would launch chunks of pavement into the air like mini-geysers. The global power grid would go dark within a week. Cockroaches seeking warmth inside electrical junction boxes and power plants would push aside heavy metal shielding, crush delicate circuit boards with their legs, and accidentally short-circuit entire regional energy grids. Humanity wouldn't even have time to figure out what was happening before our towns. Bridges and power lines were completely leveled from below. Once our buildings fall, we have to face the insects themselves in open combat. And that is where true cosmic horror sets in. Think about a mosquito. Normally, a mosquito lands on your arm, slips a microscopic proboscis into your skin, and drinks a tiny drop of blood. It's an annoyance. Now give that mosquito super-powered wing muscles and a reinforced strike speed. When that mosquito lands on you, the force of its wings generating momentum could hit your skin with the impact of a high-caliber bullet. Slagging it off with a quick slap wouldn't work either. If the bug has super strength, its exoskeleton is structurally built to withstand incredible kinetic stress. Swapping at a super ant on your kitchen counter would be like slamming your open hand directly into an anvil at full speed. You would break every bone in your hand while the ant simply walks away. Then look at wasps and bees. A yellow jacket stinger powered by super strength muscle contractions wouldn't just poke a tiny hole in your skin. It could drive straight through armor plating, heavy leather and bone. A swarm of superpowered wasps wouldn't just sting a crowd of people. They could punch through bulletproof glass and rip through the metal body of an armored vehicle to get inside. And what about grasshoppers and locusts? A standard locust swarm can consist of billions of insects. If each individual locust can launch itself with the physical force of a cannonball, a swarm flying across a country wouldn't just eat the crops. The collective kinetic impact of their bodies flying through the air would level entire forests, flatten towns, and tear airliner wings straight off in mid-flight. Could humanity fight back? At first, we would try to rely on our traditional military weapons, but conventional warfare becomes completely useless against an enemy that is practically microscopic, infinitely numbered, and physically indestructible to human-scale melee force. You can't shoot a gun at a swarm of super ants taking down a bridge. The bullets would bounce off their dense, reinforced chitin, or miss them entirely while destroying what's left of the bridge. Tank armor wouldn't save soldiers because a handful of beetles could get under the treads, easily flip the 60-ton tank upside down, and tear the metal hatch off like wrapping paper. Chemical weapons and insecticides would be our only remaining line of defense. Poison doesn't care how much an insect can bench press. If an ant inhales a neurotoxin, its nervous system will shut down, regardless of how strong its legs are. However, deploying enough chemical weapons to wipe out 10 quintillion super-strong insects would inevitably poison the planet's water supplies, destroy our remaining agricultural soil, and render Earth completely uninhabitable for humans long before the bugs were fully eradicated. Ironically, the ultimate downfall of the super insects wouldn't be human weapons at all. It would be their own biology and the delicate balance of the food chain. If insects suddenly possess astronomical physical power, their energy consumption, their metabolism, would have to skyrocket to sustain that level of work. They would need to consume unfathomable amounts of calories just to keep their super muscles firing. Herbivorous insects like caterpillars and grasshoppers would strip every blade of grass, leaf, and plant off the face of the earth in a matter of days to feed their new energy demands. Once the plants were gone, the global food chain would experience an immediate, cataclysmic crash. Predatory insects, like praying mantises, spiders, and dragonflies, would turn into hyper-aggressive nightmare monsters, hunting down every other bug in sight just to avoid metabolic starvation. Massive, apocalyptic insect versus insect civil wars would erupt in every field, forest, and backyard on the planet. Within a few short months, the vast majority of super insects would burn through Earth's organic resources and starve to death, leaving behind a barren, flattened planet stripped of vegetation, architecture, and human life. Giving insects super strength reveals a profound truth about how our world is constructed. Humanity hasn't dominated this planet because we are physically the strongest or most numerous creatures. We dominate because nature kept the most terrifying, capable, and abundant physical mechanics confined to a scale so small that we barely notice it. The insect world is already an endless, brutal sci-fi war zone happening right beneath our boots. Every day, right under our feet, mini-monsters are performing feats of physical strength that defy imagination. We should all be immensely grateful that an ant is small enough to step on, because if nature ever decided to unlock their true physical potential, humanity wouldn't stand a chance. Subscribe before an ant decides to obtain super strength.